Marcus stood in the middle of his living room with his jaw tight and his hands on his hips staring at the absolute chaos in front of him because somehow in the span of 40 minutes his $300,000 custom Italian sofa had been torn open from the side with stuffing spilling out onto the floor like snow, and his 7-year-old daughter Lily was crying in the corner while his 5-year-old son Ethan clutched onto their golden retriever named Biscuit, who was panting hard and looking up at Marcus with wide, desperate eyes that seemed to be begging for something Marcus couldn't understand yet, and all Marcus could feel in that moment was frustration boiling over because this wasn't the first time this week that Biscuit had destroyed something, and right now standing in the wreckage of what was supposed to be a calm Sunday afternoon, Marcus pointed at the dog and said through gritted teeth, "That's it, I've had enough of you," and the kids started crying harder, but Marcus didn't hear them because all he could see was another expensive item ruined by a dog that was supposed to be trained and well behaved. And now let me take you back a bit so you can really understand what led to this moment and how everything that looked so wrong was actually something else entirely, because Marcus Chen wasn't just wealthy, he was the kind of wealthy that made headlines, the founder and CEO of a tech empire that had revolutionized cloud computing and made him a billionaire before he turned 40, and with that success came a lifestyle most people only dream about: a sprawling estate in Connecticut with 12 bedrooms and a staff of 9, a private jet that sat waiting at the local airfield whenever he needed it, and a schedule so packed with meetings and calls and international flights that he sometimes went entire weeks without eating dinner with his own children. And after his wife passed away 3 years ago from a sudden illness, the guilt of that distance started eating at him slowly, quietly, in ways he didn't fully acknowledge but tried to fix with gifts and expensive vacations and anything money could buy, including Biscuit, who came into their lives when Lily begged for a dog for her 5th birthday, and Marcus, remembering how his own childhood dog had been his best friend during lonely years, agreed without hesitation. And from the very first day Biscuit arrived as an 8-week-old golden ball of fluff, something clicked between that dog and those kids, because Biscuit wasn't just a pet. Biscuit became their shadow, their protector, their constant companion in a house that often felt too big and too quiet, with their father always working and their mother gone and the nannies rotating through like seasonal help. And Biscuit seemed to understand all of that in a way that animals sometimes do, sensing the emotional weight in a home and deciding silently to carry some of it. And for 2 years Biscuit was perfect, the kind of dog trainers brag about: calm, obedient, intuitive, never chewing on furniture, never barking without reason, always positioned somewhere near Lily and Ethan, whether they were playing in the garden or watching cartoons or sleeping in their beds. And Marcus appreciated that, even if he didn't always show it, because Biscuit made his life easier, made the guilt a little lighter, knowing his kids had something loyal and loving by their side when he couldn't be. But then about 2 weeks before that Sunday when the sofa was destroyed, something shifted in Biscuit, and nobody could explain why, because it started small, with the dog barking at random moments in the middle of the night, standing at the bottom of the staircase and barking at nothing until one of the staff members would come down and shush him and find nothing wrong, and then it escalated to scratching at walls, specifically the wall in the playroom where the kids spent most of their time. And when Marcus first saw the claw marks on the expensive hand-painted wallpaper imported from France, he felt a flash of anger but chalked it up to maybe anxiety, or maybe Biscuit was just getting older and developing quirks, and the vet said the dog was perfectly healthy, so Marcus let it go. But then Biscuit started blocking doorways, standing right in the threshold of the playroom and refusing to move when the kids tried to walk in. And when Marcus saw this happen one afternoon, he thought it was some kind of dominance behavior, some training regression, so he hired a behaviorist who came and observed and said the dog seemed stressed but couldn't identify a cause, and recommended more outdoor time, more stimulation, more structure, but nothing helped. And then the real destruction started, because Biscuit began knocking things over in the playroom, specifically a tall bookshelf near the window, and at first it seemed accidental, but it happened 3 times in 1 week, and each time Marcus had to pay someone to come reset the shelf and pick up the books and toys scattered everywhere, and each time his patience wore thinner because he didn't have time for this, not with a company to run and a board meeting in Tokyo and 2 kids who needed stability, not chaos. And so by the time that Sunday came and Marcus saw his sofa ripped open and the kids crying and Biscuit standing there looking frantic, something inside him snapped, and he decided right then and there that the dog had to go because this wasn't working anymore. And Lily screamed, "No daddy, please don't take Biscuit away, he's trying to tell us something." And Marcus looked at her and said, "Honey, dogs don't talk, dogs just act, and when they act like this it means they're not trained properly." And Ethan was sobbing into Biscuit's fur saying, "He's a good boy daddy, he's a good boy." And Marcus felt his heart twist, but he pushed it down because he was a man who solved problems with logic, with money, with decisions, and this decision was made. And he told the kids to go upstairs, and he called the head of his household staff to arrange for a rescue organization to come pick up Biscuit in the morning. And that night the house was heavy with silence. The kind of silence that presses on your chest and makes it hard to breathe, and Marcus sat alone in his study trying to convince himself he was doing the right thing while upstairs Lily and Ethan lay in their beds refusing to sleep, holding onto each other for comfort because the only constant they had was about to be taken away, and Biscuit that night didn't sleep either because instead of lying down he paced, and he paced specifically around the playroom, and when the night staff noticed they just assumed the dog was anxious about sensing the tension in the home. But what nobody knew, not Marcus, not the staff, not even the children, was that Biscuit had been trying to warn them for 2 weeks about something happening inside the walls of that playroom, because dogs can hear things and smell things that humans cannot, and what Biscuit had detected was a slow gas leak coming from a faulty valve in the antique radiator that sat against the west wall of the playroom, and over the course of 2 weeks that leak had been growing worse, seeping invisible odorless natural gas into the room in small amounts, and while the levels hadn't reached dangerous concentrations yet, they were climbing every day, and the scratching at the wall was Biscuit trying to get to the source, and the barking at night was Biscuit alerting anyone who would listen, and the blocking of the doorway was Biscuit physically trying to keep the children out of that room, and the knocking over of the bookshelf was Biscuit trying to draw attention to that corner of the room where the radiator sat hidden behind furniture. But nobody understood, because to human eyes it all looked like a dog misbehaving, and the sofa that Marcus had been so furious about had been torn open because inside its cushion was a nest of wires that had been chewed through by mice, wires connected to a floor lamp that sat near the playroom entrance, and those frayed wires were now a spark waiting to happen, and Biscuit had smelled the mice, had heard them moving inside the furniture, and had been trying to get to them and eliminate the threat, and so the destruction wasn't destruction at all, it was protection in the only language Biscuit knew how to speak. And that night, while everyone slept except Biscuit, the gas levels in the playroom reached a critical point, and at 2 in the morning Lily, who sometimes wandered to the playroom when she had bad dreams, got out of bed and started walking down the hallway, and Biscuit heard her footsteps and bolted from his position near the playroom door and ran straight at her, and when Lily tried to push past him to get to the playroom where her favorite stuffed animal was, Biscuit did something he had never done before. He grabbed the sleeve of her pajamas gently but firmly with his teeth and started pulling her backwards away from the door, and Lily started crying, and the commotion woke Ethan, who came out of his room, and then one of the night staff came running, and then Marcus, woken by the noise, came stumbling down the hallway demanding to know what was happening, and when he saw Biscuit gripping Lily's sleeve he assumed the dog had finally snapped, and he lunged forward to grab Biscuit and pull him off. But just as he reached for the dog, the floor lamp in the playroom, the one with the frayed wires, flickered and sparked, and that spark met the gas in the air, and the windows of the playroom blew outward with a force that shook the entire house. And if Lily had been standing in that doorway, if she had walked into that room, she would have been consumed by fire in an instant. But she wasn't in that room because Biscuit had pulled her back. Biscuit had known somehow, in the way that only animals know, and Marcus stood frozen in the hallway, covered in dust and debris, watching flames pour out of what used to be his children's playroom. And then he looked down at Biscuit, who was now pressed against both kids, shielding them with his body, even as sirens began to wail in the distance because someone had already called 911. And in that moment Marcus felt his entire worldview crack open, because every single behavior he had punished Biscuit for, every scratch, every bark, every blocked doorway, every torn cushion, played back in his mind like a film, and he saw it clearly now: the pattern, the purpose, the desperate attempt of a loyal dog trying to save the people he loved most. And Marcus dropped to his knees right there in the hallway, with ash floating through the air and his children crying and his staff running, and he looked at Biscuit and he couldn't speak, because what words could possibly be enough? And Biscuit just looked back at him with those same eyes that had been begging him for weeks to understand, to listen, to trust. And Marcus felt something break inside his chest, the part of him that had been so certain, so controlled, so sure he always knew best. And he reached out slowly and he put his hand on Biscuit's head and he whispered, "I'm sorry," and the dog leaned into his hand, and that was it. That was all that needed to happen, because sometimes apologies don't require speeches. Sometimes they just require presence. And the fire department came and confirmed the gas leak and confirmed the faulty wires and confirmed that if anyone had been in that room they wouldn't have survived. And they asked how the family knew to stay out, and Marcus looked at Biscuit and said, "He told us, we just didn't listen." And over the next few weeks, as the playroom was rebuilt and the house was inspected and new safety measures were installed, Marcus changed, not in dramatic obvious ways but in quiet important ones, because he started coming home earlier and he started sitting on the floor with his kids and Biscuit watching cartoons, and he stopped assuming he always knew what was best, and he started paying attention to the beings around him, human and animal alike, who might be trying to tell him something he wasn't ready to hear. And Biscuit went back to being calm because the threat was gone and the job was done, and now there was nothing left to warn anyone about. And every night Marcus would find Biscuit lying across the threshold of the kids' bedroom door like a guardian, like a sentinel, like exactly what he had always been. And one night about a month after the explosion, Marcus sat down next to Biscuit in the hallway and just stayed there for an hour, not talking, not doing anything, just sitting beside the dog who had saved everything that mattered. And when Lily came out and asked what he was doing, Marcus said, "I'm just being here," and she smiled and sat down too. And then Ethan came and sat, and then all four of them were just there together in the hallway, and Biscuit let out a long content sigh. The kind of sigh that dogs make when they finally feel at peace. And Marcus realized something that he wished he had understood years ago, that loyalty doesn't always look the way we expect it to, and that sometimes the ones who love us most will do things we don't understand to keep us safe, and our job isn't to punish them for it. Our job is to trust them enough to wonder why before we judge. And if you've ever had someone in your life, a pet, a friend, a family member, who did something that seemed wrong at the time but turned out to be exactly what you needed, I'd love to hear about it in the comments, because I think we all have moments where we misjudge the people trying to protect us, and maybe talking about it helps us recognize it sooner next time. And if this story made you feel something, maybe share it with someone who loves dogs, or someone who's a parent, or anyone who might need a reminder today that loyalty isn't always loud. Sometimes it scratches at walls and knocks over bookshelves and tears open sofas and waits patiently for us to finally see what it's been trying to say all along.